Welcome to Mind Over Matter, the space where resilience meets revelation. Today, we are joined by Kathleen Marie Johnson, a visionary in unlocking human potential. With her expertise in mental mastery, personal growth, and transformational practices, Kathleen shows how the mind can reshape reality, overcome obstacles, and guide us to the extraordinary results. Tonight, we explore the power of mindset, the science of focus, and the art of living intentionally. Welcome to the show, Kathleen. It's such an honor to have you.
Anya, it's wonderful to be here. So excited for this opportunity. Thank you.
Mhm. So, Kathleen, how do you define the relationship between mindset and real world transformation?
Well, I think we cannot underestimate the importance of mindset. This is something that we hear a lot in our culture. We hear about it from performance coaches and motivational speakers, and we hear about it, all around us. But it's God that told us about this first in his word. You have where the word says, set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. And we are told to set the mind in the flesh is death. And I'd love to talk about that more later. But the thing that happens is our focus is tied to our freedom. I have learned in my studies that our life will go in the direction of our dominant thoughts, and that everything we expose ourselves to is going to impact our reality. So that's transformative.
Mhm. Yeah, that's amazing. And can shifting perception alone create tangible change, or does action always have to follow?
I think perception, every type of thought that we have, every type of thought that we have in any capacity impacts our environment and impacts the world around us. Even if I have an attitude in my heart towards somebody, if I'm in the same room with somebody and I'm angry or I'm frustrated or I'm feeling bitterness or resentment, a person can feel the energy of that. They can feel that in the room. So even in my thought life, that's impacting the world around me. But certainly when I'm in a certain frame of mind and I put action behind it, that can be either positive or negative. So it just amplifies it, Anya. Our thoughts are impacted by the things that we think about bring our feelings. There's a thought-feeling loop. So if I'm thinking negatively about something, I'm going to start feeling negatively, and it's very likely that my action will be negative. So I would just say that everything impacts the world around us, from our thoughts to our actions, and they're all linked.
Mhm. Yeah, and that connection between thought and reality is where potential becomes possibility.
Well, certainly. I mean, I think there are people that say that thoughts are things, and I would absolutely agree with that. I think that thoughts start in the unseen. It's like when the Apostle Paul said, we should focus not on the things that are seen, but on the things that are unseen. I believe that all reality begins in the unseen, in our thought life. And when it comes into the seen world, into the physical manifested reality, it starts in the unseen and comes into the seen. But those two things are linked, they're connected. And they
Mhm.
absolutely affect our reality.
Yeah, definitely. And in your work, what's the most common mental block you see holding people back?
Well, I think overall you'd have to stand back from that a little bit and think about the focus being either the mind of the flesh or the mind of the spirit, because ultimately, there are blocks that we have. We have fear, we have anxiety, but the reason that we have those things, Anya, is because we're using the wrong part of ourselves to operate. We are spiritual creatures, we are spiritual beings, and we are meant to be guided by the Spirit. And that's where things like communion with God and intuition, the gentle whisper, that's the guidance system that we have been given in our design. We've been given that as our design. But when we are operating by the other part of our mind, our natural mind, our analytical mind, our sort of left brain dominant mind, we tend to overanalyze things. We tend to be drawn quickly into a fear response, which activates our limbic system. And before you know it, we're in fight or flight. And instead of that being something that can help us from running from a tiger, like, back in ancient times, it ends up being something we live in. And we live in this place where we're using the wrong mind. And so the blocks that come there, they're systemic, we live in a place of fear and anxiety and worry, and we are keeping ourselves from being able to be at peace and to be in the present moment and to just be in harmony with ourselves and with other people. So if we can start to recognize that there are two minds, there is the mind of our natural mind, which is, our thinking mind, our reasoning mind, the mind of the soul, and the mind of the spirit, which is the intuition and the guidance system, and realize which one of those is in control or which one is operating, we can quickly switch. I like to tell people there are switches that you can make. When you realize you're over here, that you're operating from this mind, you can switch to the mind of the spirit by letting that go and just coming to a place of relaxation and reminding yourself that you can let the peace of Christ rule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that connection between thought and reality is where potential becomes possibility.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, even quantum physics has shown us that there are realities that exist as a potential. It's a potential until it becomes a reality. And so our mind is very powerful for that. We have a potential of being successful. We have a potential of being, in failure. And what we think about is going to impact that. If I can't see a certain future for myself of health or prosperity or wellness or community, then how in the world will I ever operate in that? Our minds are so powerful. And so it's like the Bible says, without vision, the people perish. We, Anya, I believe we have to have a vision of where we're going, and we have to be able to keep that clearly in our mind. And when we do that, we are signaling our mind that that's what we're going for. That's the direction that we're moving in.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 100%. And how can someone begin dismantling that block without feeling overwhelmed?
Well, that's it. You say it. It's very easy to feel overwhelmed if you feel like your thoughts are kind of running away and you can't have control over it. It can be overwhelming. So I think the very first important step is just awareness. Just by being aware that I have thoughts, but those thoughts are not me. I'm behind that. The reason that I can sort of think about my thinking or think about my thoughts is because the spiritual part of me that's behind that is able to recognize, when I have thoughts running through my mind, I can stop and just be aware of those and be like, okay, I see what's happening. Sometimes you will be in a state of mind where you have a lot of negative self-talk. And of course, that's so destructive. And so sometimes we can just be aware of it. And just that awareness is a step in the right direction, because now you realize that you do have the capacity to pivot to something else. Because, the things that you're thinking, you can pivot to thinking about something else, and that will naturally change your thought formation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and breaking barriers in small steps often opens doors we didn't even know were closed.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that there's a lot that we learn from neuroscience about repetition. When I start building a new habit, like let's say if I want to start setting my mind on good things, I can take a small piece of time and deliberately think of something good. The Bible talks about clothing yourself with Christ, with compassion, gentleness, humility, and patience. I can think of myself as reacting to a situation a certain way. And just by doing that, I'm signaling a part of myself to tell, with intention, this is who I want to be. This is who I'm claiming to be. I'm patient. I'm kind. I'm good to others. I don't react. These kind of things, as we repeat them and repeat them and repeat them, they will start to sink in. We become recoded or rewired just by the thoughts that we think, just by the things that we say. I like to say, think it, see it, say it. It's what I think. It's what I speak. And it's what I visualize, what I imagine. All of those things repeated over time will impact the way that I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how does mental resilience differ from mental toughness? And why does it matter?
Well, I think that there can be an element of the natural mind going into overdrive if you're just thinking about toughness. you're like, I'm stubborn, I'm not going to go past this certain thing, and I'm just rock solid. But resilience is different. Resilience is like grit, it's persistence. It's being, committed to something at a deeper level. It's not just toughness, not, an unbendable thing that can never be flexible or that can never kind of adjust, but something that that has staying power, that I am absolutely committed to something. I'm determined. Um, I think there's a variance there. And I think that we have to learn to decide and make a decision about what we believe and how we're going to live our lives. And I think there's tremendous power in just making a real committed decision about something. And when we do that, a natural resistance will start to be, or resilience rather, will start to be built into that, because I know where I'm going. I'm not going to be tossed back and forth by the waves. I'm going to decide that this is the direction that I'm going to be in, or I can even decide that I'm going to let the peace of Christ rule. I'm not going to be tossed here and there. I'm not going to let myself be overwhelmed today, worried, anxious. No, I am going to allow the Spirit of God to live through me.
Yeah, absolutely. And can resilience be learned at any stage, or is it something innate?
I think that there is an innate sense of awareness that is given to us as part of our design. Again, we're given a guidance system that is our intuition, but I don't think that there's any place along the timeline of our lives that we can't grow and learn and develop those things and cultivate them. In fact, we're instructed to do that. We have to decide that we're going to train ourselves to be godly, that, like newborn babies to crave spiritual milk. We can, Anya, we can subject ourselves to anything we want. We have the choice. I can yield to the things that are going to make me angry or upset and get me all agitated, or I can decide and choose to focus on things that are going to bring me into the right space, into a place where I can deal with the reality. We've talked before about the power of music, the power of nature, just being out in nature. So whatever I expose myself is going to change me, and it's going to help me develop these things. If I decide that I'm going to practice learning to meditate and have mindfulness, I will grow in that. I will be able to develop that skill as I go through my life. And so I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah. And that distinction is fascinating. Like, endurance is one thing, but adaptability is where life truly tests us.
Right. I do think we have to be adaptable. We have to realize sometimes that our fiercest resistance is not healthy. It's just like, you have a reed, it will snap in half. You don't want to get to the place where you cannot be able to adjust to things and to give the things new perspective. Sometimes just changing our perspective is so powerful. We think that this one situation is going to destroy us, it's going to ruin us and everything. But if we stand back away from it and look at it from a broader perspective, we realize that even the most difficult things, God can use them for our good, for our advancement. But if our reaction becomes hateful and belligerent and negative, that what we're going to do is we're going to make all those things worse. No matter what happens to us, we have the capacity to react with kindness and with calmness. We have the ability to do that. And I think when we're trying to do it in our own strength, we're going to fail. But if we can let the Spirit do it through us, then that's different. We can react to something negative with a soft answer that turns away wrath. And we can choose that again and again until that thing becomes habitual. It becomes a way of life. As we practice it, that's what neuroplasticity is showing us. What I'm doing every day. How am I thinking? What am I focused on? What am I choosing again and again and again? That thing will become habitual, and it will impact not just me, but the world around me in magnificent ways.
Yeah, definitely. And also, visualization and focus are often mentioned in personal growth circles. How do you guide people to make these tools effective rather than abstract?
Well, I would just say that being aware that your imagination is tied to your heart, biblically speaking, it's just like when Jesus said, whoever looks at that woman is lustfully is committing adultery with her in his heart. Well, how do you commit adultery in your heart? In your imagination, what you're thinking about. And so when the Bible says, above all else, guard your heart, there is an aspect of that applies to our imagination. I need to guard the things that come into my mind. And so I can take time in meditation and visualize something good, maybe something I'm hoping that will happen. Maybe it's a reconciliation between family members, or it's a successful thing that I'm focused on, an outcome that I'm hoping for. But I have to practice that. And just like anything else, I will improve my ability to visualize those things as I practice it. And so I tell people to start with something that is easy to visualize, easy to imagine. There are programs out there that say to start with thinking about your house. You stop and think of your front door, think of walking through your front door, things that are familiar to you. And as you develop this skill or this ability to hone that, you can go deeper and you can visualize things that you haven't seen before. You can imagine a future that maybe you haven't seen. But as you practice visualizing the things that you have seen, your skill level, your sort of mental ability to do this will be sharpened and improved. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely does. And are there pitfalls where visualization can backfire if done incorrectly?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. But I think that if you are prone to kind of thinking about fearful scenarios, if you catch yourself seeing negative things, that could be very detrimental, because when we see those things, it's impacting us. There's a part of our mind that doesn't recognize the difference between something that we visualize that's real and something that isn't. They've been able to look at this and see how it can affect even our muscles, and that there are neurons that are responding to every single thing that we think about. So it would just be a practice, Anya, to practice visualizing things that bring our mind and our heart into a place of harmony and love and goodness. The visualization, if you keep going to the negative thing, you need to try something else. You just need to make sure that what you're visualizing is, like the word says, whatever is good, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is worthy of praise, good things, life-giving things, if that makes sense.
Making the abstract practical, like that's the bridge between dreaming and doing.
Yeah, I think it is. Was it Walt Disney that says, if you can dream it, you can do it? I think that there is a truth to that. There's a spiritual truth underneath that is true. And that if you look throughout history, whenever people have been able to accomplish great things, they imagined it first, whether it was a gadget or an invention, that thing existed in somebody's imagination first. And so when we think about, the Bible talks about casting down vain imaginations. Sometimes you can be upset with somebody and you can kind of see yourself getting, maybe doing something, maybe you're arguing with them, or you can picture going into like a speech or to a thing and it's not going well, it didn't go good. Nobody liked it. You got to watch those things and catch yourself and just realize, wow, my imagination is powerful. I can use it for good. And I don't have to be stressed out when that happens. I will just pivot to a good thing, pivot to a scene that is acceptable or lovely. I have a few places that are like my happy places, Anya. I've got a place, my mother-in-law, she lives on the lake, and there's this beautiful tree, and you can see this gorgeous view of the lake. And so sometimes you can pick a place in nature like that and just have that be the place that you go to in your mind when there's stress coming at you from all different directions. You're like, nope, in my mind, I'm going to go to my happy place. And there you can draw yourself into a place of peace. So that can be effective as well.
Yeah. And if someone listening feels stuck or lost, what's the first mental shift they should embrace today?
Well, just think about those two minds. The reason that it's possible to be double-minded is because a human being does have two minds. You have the mind of the soul, or the mind of the flesh, and the mind of the spirit. And so when you're in that place, in the mind of the soul, and you're stuck there, you're stuck in sort of a limited thing, because you can only see, reason can only take us so far. But the spiritual world is beyond that. It's limitless. There, it's a place where there is no restriction of time or space, but all things are possible for one who believes. So just realizing, hey, if I'm stuck in that place where I feel limited and restricted, and I feel like, the walls are closing in, or I'm discouraged, hey, I'm using this mind, but it's possible now for me to stop and let the peace that's underneath, because peace is there underneath and deep in our spirit, there's peace. And so just being aware of that, and that you can quiet this other voice and let the peace come through. Just practice that today and keep practicing it until it becomes an easy switch. And I have found that, where this used to be so difficult, it used to be so just difficult to get myself out of that state of mind. Now I can stop, and within just a few moments, many times, I can feel the peace of God coming through. And this is something, as you practice, it will get easier and easier and easier. And you can get to a place where you just live in peace.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how can they maintain that shift when external circumstances push back?
I think it's something that you have to practice. It's just like a habit. There are habits that we have that, I remember for me, I used to be very naturally reactive. The thing that you have practiced becomes automatic. It's the thing, it starts in your conscious mind and it goes into your subconscious mind. And we think of that, Anya, for things like driving your car. When you're first driving your car, the first time you're learning and you're watching every turn and you've got your turn signal and you're thinking about it. And then you get to the place where you don't even have to think about it. You can have a conversation with somebody, your subconscious mind is taken over. Well, one of the things that we don't realize is that happens with all this other stuff too, is that your subconscious mind just sort of takes over. So if you are a person who reacts when somebody talks, says something to you, and you can sort of snap back, whatever's in you is gonna come out. So that behavior can be overcome, but it will take practicing the new behavior until the new behavior then becomes automatic. And I don't have to think about that because I'm just different. I've just changed. I don't have to strive. I don't have to push. I don't have to think about it. Just like driving my car, I'm just naturally able to react in peace. And so that's what we're going for. That's what it means to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, is that there's a real change, that your mind is no longer the old you, it's the new you. And the new you stays in a place of perfect peace and harmony and goodness and light. And it's wonderful. And it's something that is ongoing. Even though I know I've made a lot of strides by some of these mindfulness practices, I know I still have a very long way to go. But when you see some of the progress, it really fills your heart with joy because you know what's possible.
Yeah, and that moment of clarity in the seed, nurture it, and growth becomes inevitable.
So true. That's just really well said.
So Kathleen reminds us that mind isn't just a tool, it's the architect of our lives. If this episode inspired a spark, take it as your signal to act, reflect, and rewire. Your next breakthrough begins in thought, but it blossoms in action. Stay curious, stay intentional, and let your mind lead the way.